The opinions expressed in the following program are not necessarily those of the funding agencies.
Well, it was somewhere in the late 60s when I first began to realize that I actually committed a crime and was serving a life sentence in the state of Texas.
And that's when he shot through my hat brim, just about 1/4 of an inch from my head, and just missed my ear.
All of them was white, no blacks around, and I didn't know, I was in fear of my life anyway, and I just kept on fighting, until I felt that it was time for me to leave.
He didn't kill him because he was white. He just killed him because he's mad at the world.
I'm not a violent person, but drugs will make you do things, blind.
I figured as long as we did what he asked us to do, that there was not too much danger involved.
I had never killed anybody before this, and it was in my mind, what's it feel like to kill a man? How am I going to feel about it? So one day, while me and my buddy was out hunting, the thought just overpowered me. Well, there's nobody around. Seemed like it could be the perfect crime. Now's my time to find out. So I shot him, and I killed him.
If the State of Texas Parole Board puts him or anybody else like him on the streets and he commits that murder again, they have committed that act themselves. They have put him out there to kill.
The Texas Department of Corrections, the state prison system of Texas, is a sprawling agricultural and industrial empire. Presently, 15 prison units and farms on approximately 100,000 acres produce an economic base that keeps the price of maintaining each prisoner below 1/4 the cost northern states have to pay. TDC at present holds more than 28,000 men in custody, the largest prison population in the nation. Roughly speaking, 1/10 of the 28,000 are doing life sentences. From the men whose death sentences were commuted in 1972 as a result of the Supreme Court's decision on the death penalty, to the man convicted of habitual criminality, as evidenced by his 3 convictions for forging checks, to the armed robbers and barroom killers, and even the policeman who raped and murdered a 3-year-old girl. These men doing life in Texas are a very mixed lot. Some are dangerous, some aren't so dangerous. Some are mentally disturbed, others are retarded. A few are non-criminals or squares, relatively sensitive and intelligent individuals who snapped under some extreme psychological pressure or who committed crimes of passion. Others are proud to be part of the criminal lifestyle, proud to be known as convicts rather than as inmates. Others are simply the losers in our society. Whenever this topic of criminals and how to deal with them is raised, there is never a shortage of opinions, some whimsical, others heartfelt, most very simplistic. During the next hour, we will be hearing from some who have spent a lot of time dealing with the issues: philosophers, politicians, penologists, and prison reformers. People whose occupations place them in the grips of the dilemma. But we will also hear from those who don't possess the luxury of objectivity, the ones least often heard, yet most deeply affected, the victims of crime, and the lifers themselves.
If you do anything here in Texas and you're sentenced and you come to TDC, say, man, you may not never get out. It doesn't make any difference what kind of crime you're committed.
Obviously, life sentences are given in the case of serious crimes, murder, rape, aggravated robbery or kidnapping, and in some cases as an alternative to the death penalty. But sometimes they are given for repetition of somewhat less serious offenses.
I was convicted under Article 62 of the Penal Code and the jury had no say in my sentence. If I was convicted of the primary charge, which was robbery by assault, and found guilty along with that of having been prior convicted on a prior offense, well, it was mandatory. The law says I must have a life sentence.
Furthermore, Texas has an habitual criminality law, the high bitchel, the big bitch, a life sentence given upon conviction of a third felony, any felony, forging checks, driving while intoxicated, stealing articles from parked cars.
They sent you for your prior convictions, something that you've already been sentenced once in court, something that you came to prison and you paid for. You paid your debt to society for, and it's used against you again. It would be just like you going to the bank and borrowing money and paying your note off, and they make you pay again.
But life sentences are rarely for the rest of an inmate's natural life. Those convicted before the law changed in August of 1977 are automatically eligible for parole consideration after serving 20 years, 1/3 of the life sentence, which is calculated at 60 years. Subtract from this good behavior or good time earned by the inmate, and the average actual life sentence served in Texas today drops to approximately 15 years, with some theoretically as short as 9.
The feeling is you lock a person up for X number of years, and you give him a chance. In my case, or anyone's case with a life sentence, they don't, they never know. They just sit back and hope that you're going to get another chance, and that it's not too late before you get it.
But the law did change in 1977. Now inmates convicted of murder, rape, or aggravated offenses, those committed with a deadly weapon, are obliged to serve the full 20 years before even being considered for parole. Good time becomes virtually meaningless.
There have been times when you felt like killing people. The parole looms in front of you, especially on a life sentence, when you have done the time required to make parole. Now, if you're a 20-year man with a life sentence, parole shouldn't have any effect on you. It wouldn't on me.
Later parole eligibility means longer sentences, and longer sentences mean more inmates behind prison walls, and more inmates mean newer and bigger prison units, and new prison units mean more tax dollars. And is it worth it? To answer that question, several others need to be asked. What does the life sentence mean to our society?
Well, the public sentiment is that in spite of all the professionalism, or at least a good part of some public sentiment, is that in spite of all the professionalism, in spite of all the examination, in spite of all that the Department of Corrections says about a prisoner, that there must be at some level somebody who is elected by the people who will reflect what they view as the popular attitude about convicted criminals. And that is that if you committed the crime, you do the time.
Who are the ones that are locked up?
Sure, when I first came down here, I said, yeah, okay, I killed this man. Maybe I do. Now, mind you, I said maybe. I do deserve this life sentence. But after the years go by, you say it's even killing the man wasn't worth the life sentence.
And who are the ones most concerned that they remain locked up?
I don't think the parole board or whoever would be doing an adequate job if they turn somebody like him loose.
You can't do something and not pay for it. The man took a life, and it was not self-defense whatsoever. It was cold-blooded murder.
And most importantly, what is the purpose of the life sentence?
Well, from society's standpoint, the purpose of a life sentence is first of all, probably punishment. Probably that's what most people think of. Society believes in punishment. I think almost everybody in society, including people in prison, believe in punishment. They may disagree about who ought to be punished, but they believe in punishment.
I think the main reason we punish really is retributive. We are establishing the fact that society has certain laws that no society can survive if people violate those laws, that to violate them has to carry a price. We're expressing society's moral condemnation of the individual who has committed the offense. I think that's what distinguishes criminal offense from a civil offense. There is that element of moral condemnation.
The retributive is told that the only reason that can justify punishing anyone is that the person deserves the punishment, that punishment ought to be strictly in accordance with desert. And that justice requires that the judge focus on what he deserves, not on how much good he can do out in the society by using this person as an instrument for the social good.
That's sort of the old eye for an eye notion. But that's not the only way to think about justifying punishment. Another way that Jeremy Bentham started was called the utilitarian way. And that involves looking at what way of treating you will serve society's best interests. So for instance, one aspect of utilitarian approach to justifying punishment is to think about the idea of deterrence. We should treat you in a way that will deter you and other people from committing the same crime in the future.
But the total effectiveness of prison sentences as a deterrent to crime must be viewed with some skepticism. In the first place, in a society where for approximately every 100 offenses committed, less than 2 offenders are convicted and sent to prison, deterrence must not be a very great cause for hesitation among confirmed criminals. Secondly, it is estimated that over the last 25 years, 35% of the inmates coming into TDC have been confined in prison before. In other words, 1 out of 3 inmates who have been held in TDC were not deterred from activities that would send them back to prison. And chances are that many of the others who haven't returned simply haven't been caught.
The fact that many people who have committed crimes return to prison merely means that they cannot be deterred, but they are only a small sector of the population. The public at large is restrained from committing crime. Most people, most of the time, do not commit crimes, and one reason they don't is that they fear punishment.
Another aspect of the utilitarian approach to punishment is to think of punishment as a sort of treatment where you take a person who's behaving antisocially and you treat him in such a way that you change him from being an antisocial deviant into someone who can be a productive member of society.
Unless you've got a prison that's willing to try to rehabilitate and change a man and correct him, I can see no other purpose of holding him in prison unless you just want to destroy him.
You can't rehabilitate anyone unless he wants to be rehabilitated. You can, however, establish an atmosphere or a climate which is relatively conducive to rehabilitation, and in that respect, TDC does well. It has a climate which includes discipline. 96% of these people who come to prison are school dropouts. They come from extremely permissive environments. They have never been subjected either to an internally or externally imposed discipline. TDC does that. TDC also has a productive work program.
I think at the present time in the Texas Department of Corrections, we have an attitude that is reflected by one of the top officials who once said that more psychology is learned on the end of an aggie or a hoe than all the psychology books ever written. And their attitude is that through hard work that somehow this person is going to find a solution to an in-depth psychological problem. When it gets down to it, production is really the overriding principle, not rehabilitation in the whole operation of the Texas Department of Corrections.
Again, almost half of the men who come to TDC were never employed on a long-range basis. They had no sustained record of employment. TDC introduces them to an 8-hour day, introduces them to quality control, introduces them to production control, and habituates them to the type of work week which you would encounter in the free world. And finally, TDC emphasizes, as no other prison in America, education. For instance, it has more prisoners enrolled in junior college programs than the rest of the prisons and the Federal Bureau of Prisons combined.
We don't know how to rehabilitate. That doesn't mean that we should abandon the rehabilitative ideal. If we don't know enough to rehabilitate the majority of offenders, we don't know so little that we have a right to stop trying. I think when we lock the doors behind somebody, we have an obligation to do the best we can, an obligation to society as well as to that individual, to do the best we can to make it possible for that person to lead a law-abiding life.
Another aspect of the utilitarian approach is simply that of incapacitation or isolation. We try to put you in prison so that you won't be committing crimes, so that you'll be unable to commit those crimes that you would commit if you were out in society.
And secure incarceration is the major concern at TDC. And what are the punishing aspects of this incarceration?
If you were locked in a hotel room with the best accommodations available and couldn't leave it, you'd feel a lot of pressure, because it's just natural for people to want freedom, the freedom to do things, to control their own lives. The pressure of being confined in a fairly small area, a limited area, with a lot of other people who are also can't leave, who share the same tension. The tension kind of magnifies, it builds up.
You never know where it's going to come from. People are so bitter about their being down here, bitter against the environment that they're in, bitter against the officials, bitter against other convicts. And you never know where it's coming from. From day one when you wake up to the night time you go to bed, it's constantly, hey, what's behind me?
There's 26,000 people here, and it seems like they're all right around you. No privacy at all. No privacy in doing anything. You know, eating, sleeping, or using the restroom, or anything. There's no privacy whatsoever. You're never alone.
You can't afford to offend anybody, not even a cuss word. It could cost you your life. The wrong word. 12 cents could cost you your life. That's the type of people that you're living in. And can you imagine 16 years of that, what it does to a person in the same environment, day after day? No vacations, no days off. It's it. Even in your sleep, you learn to sleep with one eye open.
It may sound horrible, but remember, these are people who committed crimes, who terrorized, damaged, or ended the lives of others. And who are those others? The victims of crime. Will they ever forget? Do they still carry the scars of those events? What kind of justice have they been offered? Is it enough? Could it be too much? Judge for yourself. Paul F. Cole, Jr. has served approximately 20 years on a life sentence. He professes to be a religious man, and in 1968, using proxy marriage papers signed and notarized behind the walls of Ellis Prison Unit, he married a woman evangelist who runs a prison outreach effort in Warsaw, New York. Cole had spent time in various institutions for juveniles and a mental institution before receiving his life sentence for murdering a rancher, Fay Gilliam, in a rural area not far from San Antonio, Texas.
Well, it was somewhere in the late 60s when I first began to realize that I actually committed a crime and was serving a life sentence in the state of Texas. Well, as far as the crime in itself, I cannot give a clear picture of it, due to the fact is I've had that head injury, and I was more or less a mental patient, and it took years of training, and coming down the line to restore my sanity as I have it today.
I was getting ready to put up hay for the winter for the cattle, and I needed some help for the farm, and also I needed help for the house, as my wife was in the hospital at the time and I had children at home. So I got Mr. Cole out of the employment office in San Antonio, and I went in and picked him and his wife up and paid their motel bill to get their clothes, and brought them out, bought them groceries, and got them settled, and we were getting ready to start baling hay. And my brother had come out of the house that morning to go to his truck, to his car to get some work clothes to change into before we went to the field. And I'd went out to milk the cow, and I heard him call out to me, and so I come out of the barn, and I seen he was laying on the ground between the back gate of the yard fence and the house. So I went to running to the house, and about that time, why, the shots went to hitting all around me. So I run up and got behind the station wagon, and then Cole raised up on the other side. And so anyhow, we went back and forth until he kind of calmed down and put the gun down. So I told him, well, let's get him in, let's go see about it and take him to the doctor. So we walked in the yard, but he was holding a gun on me at the time. And he asked me where he had shot him, and so I bent down to show him. Brother was laying face down. And when I took my eyes off of him to show him where the shot had went in, why, that's when he shot through my hat brim. And I straightened back up and kept looking at him. And so then my daughter walked out on the porch, the older daughter, and that's when he turned and was supposed to have tried to shoot her, but the gun snapped. So then Cole left in the pickup that was parked here. And so anyhow, I got my brother into the hospital in Castroville, and it was too late. In other words, the doctors were there, but he was already gone.
When I committed this crime, I was definitely an illiterate. No education whatsoever. Could not read or write, didn't want to. All I cared about was existing.
I feel that the reason he shot my brother is that he fully intended just to rob us and leave, and he probably got excited and didn't know whether he could handle both of us at the same time, so that he figured he could make a living without having to work for it. It's the only thing I can figure.
I don't believe that because my life was spared, it was an injustice. I feel that, if anything, it was justified because they weren't, at that time, giving it out fairly to everybody. Usually it was the poor man, the black man, the Mexican, who got the electric chair.
As much as from 1 to 3 years later, that people that would meet me on the street that was on the jury at the time would tell me, I said, well, I was on the jury, and said, we didn't understand that the life sentence, the difference between life and death, we felt that life would be more justified because he would have to suffer longer. And that's why the jury decided to go with the life rather than the death penalty. That they were just unaware that a person could serve out a life sentence in a matter of a few years.
I don't think that the people, the victims of the crime, really stopped to consider what amount of time means in the penitentiary. And as far as them thinking, well, give him a life sentence, keep him there the rest of his natural life, at first this might be their attitude as an alternative to death. But I can't really believe that they would, after all those years, feel this way. They'd forget it. Time erases things.
As far as forgetting that the crime happened, I don't feel that I'll ever forget it, and I don't feel that my children will.
I'd like to believe that the Paul Cole who committed that crime is dead and gone. And I believe that my TDC records here will indicate this, that during the years that I've spent here, nothing similar to this would ever occur again. And if it didn't occur in all them years, there's a good possibility it'll never occur again.
Well, I feel on a deal like that, if he's not sure of himself, he sure ought to be sure of himself to say, well, I know it won't happen no more. But I don't know whether a person that had served that many years could get out and be beneficial to himself and everyone else.
You'll find a lot of times that you'll rehabilitate a man, but yet you won't recognize it within his actions. And then you start destroying him by holding on to him, not putting what you taught him to a test.
You just don't think about it near like you did the first few years that it happened, you know, about him or your one you lost. You just, after almost 20 years, you just don't think about it that much. So I would say it's strictly up to the parole board if they felt that he was suffered enough and was capable of being out.
Situations like this where you put a man in the penitentiary, he's going to have time to think about what he done. He's going to, one day, whether he wants to admit it right then or not, he's going to regret for what he done. And in a way, he's, you might say, dying 1,000 deaths doing that life sentence, one way or another, emotionally, spiritually, but whatever, he's going to suffer. And this here in itself is good.
Thurman Tressel has spent 26 years in prison for a career in crime that has earned him less than $300. When he was 13, his father died, leaving him and his younger brother to grow up on the streets of Fort Worth, Texas. He soon began to commit petty crimes. Years later, having served time for forging a $7 check and a previous robbery, he was given the life sentence as a habitual criminal after robbing a service station in Houston of $48. He served 11 years and was paroled, only to return 5 months later for robbing a grocery store in San Angelo. In all, he has served 16 years on his life sentence.
The charge that I was charged with was a robbery charge. Although I've never hurt nobody in a robbery, it's still classified as a violent crime. And it carried a life sentence. And I went to Houston on an AA convention. And I got drunk. I guess I'm the only one that went to an alcoholics meeting and didn't get drunk, but I got drunk. And I robbed this place.
My wife was sitting over at the desk, and she was almost 7, 8 months pregnant then, and she was kind of scared. And he wanted all the money, so I started telling him, yes, sir, whatever you want, you know, you're the boss. Well, just tell me what you want, and I'll give it to you. Just don't hurt me and my wife. And so he went over to her and started making threats to her to scare me, I feel sure. And of course, we was trying to give everything, and she was crying and hysterical, and you know, please don't hurt us and all that stuff. And so he got through with the robbery, you know, and he said, don't call the police now for an hour, or I'm gonna come back and kill you. And all he said, when I start to leave here, you act like I'm just a regular customer and wave by and all that stuff, you know. And so he went out to get in his car, and he turned around and see you later and all, thank you for the good service and all. And so we went ahead and called the police, and of course the police station just a couple of blocks down the street. They was there right away, and the guy drove back around the block, right back to the station. They was out you know, getting the information from me out by the gas pump, so what kind of car it was and what the guy looked like and everything. They said, how about that old car there? And the guy was driving down the street. I said, that's it. And they ran out and caught him, you know, a couple of blocks down the street, brought him back, had him handcuffed behind, you know, his hands behind his back like this, and he was in the seat of the police car, and he was taking the money out like this. You don't try to dig it out with his hand and throwing it on the seat and saying, here's your money back. I don't want it no more, no.
Now, I know the first 3 times that I came to prison, I was young and I was wild, you know. But after I'd done all these years in here, and at one time I did almost 11 years, first time on that life sentence before I made parole. And I'd changed a whole lot because I wanted to change. And when I got out and I got back with my family, reunited with my family, and I seen how much they loved me, and and how my wife had devoted all her life is to working and raising my kids. That really changed my way of thinking and the way of feelings, you know, completely. More or less, I just done a backflip, you know, in my feelings, but at the same time, I'd been locked up so long that I had a problem when I went out. I wasn't used to being free. I was used to being under authority all the time, and I was nervous. I was scared, really. I was just what you say, scared. That's the only way I know to. I was uptight. I didn't know how to act. I didn't know how to adjust to society. But whenever I got into this trouble and got my parole revoked, I was looking for a way to get away from it, and I chose to go back to that bottle and go back to that beer joint and drink. And I sat there and drank. And it's what sent me back. It all happened the same day that I went in that beer joint. And I drank these beers. And I went in and the same thing. I robbed a place not less than 6 blocks from my house, no more than 6 blocks from my house. A store that my family's been in for years, that I even went in and bought odd and end. I went in there, just as I'm sitting here now, nothing over, no disguise, no nothing. The man knew my family, he knew me, broad open daylight, and robbed a man. And it sent me back to prison on this life sentence.
He's told me to open a restaurant, sack up the money, which I did. A lady came down the aisle there. Evidently, she is in here all the time and purchased something or other, and says, I waited on her. I had to give her change in silver because bills were already in the sack. And he told her to put the change in the sack. She said, no, it's not mine. He says, oh yeah, I know you. He said, no, you don't. He says, yes, I do too. But she didn't put her change in the sack. She did stay till they left.
And the next morning when we woke up, both of us seen and realized what we did, and we seen this money, and we hated it. And I knew that, to me, I didn't even want, you know, I knew that was it, you know. And boy, here I have. I've done 12 years, and I just threw it away. I know I'm going back now, you know.
I think the man is, you know, a habitual criminal. I believe he's, you know, something needs to be done with him. I don't know if keeping him in prison is the answer, but he's got to be in some kind of controlled atmosphere. He can't be turned loose out here on the streets, you know, because once he gets out, he's just going to do it again.
I have a wonderful family. They stuck with me through all this, you know, and you know, a man just knows that what he's done. He does things on the spur of the moment, or something, or maybe while he's under the influence of alcohol or something. And right at that time, he don't stop to think about his family or something, you know. And then he sits there and he gets to thinking about this, you know, and it gets to eating on him inside. About why he didn't stop, or why he didn't think, and why he'd hurt his family like that, you know, and why he'd do these things.
Like I said, I wouldn't pick him out as one of the all-time threats to society.
This guy just just makes you feel sorry for him, you know. Wonder how can a guy like that do it? When he's sitting there talking, you know, he sounds so sincere. But I believe when he gets out on the outside, you know, and he gets a few beers in him, he's not that guy that was sitting there talking and telling you his side of the story. You know?
Three main important things to me in life is my freedom, my health, and my family. And I know that I can do without the bottle. I know that I can walk by it. I can leave it alone. I did for 5 months when I was at the airport. But, and I know with their help, and they understand this now. They know that. And with their help and with my determination to be with them, and I know I can make it now.
I wouldn't be afraid to meet him on the street myself.
I don't believe the men can cope with life. Life is not no bed of roses, and it's just, you know, every day you have a different problem or a different set of problems every day. You have to take your problems and make something good out of life, you know. Because if every time I had a problem I went out and robbed somebody, I'd have to rob somebody about 100 times a day.
I guess I just born a loser, you know. But I know if there is such thing as being born one. But I think that I've got to where I'm going to win a few. If I can ever get out, I think I'll win a few.
Terry Mack Smith has served approximately 12 years on a life sentence for the murder in 1968 of Leroy Cooper in Texarkana, a community torn by racial conflict. Before this, he had a history of juvenile and petty offenses, but had never been sent to prison. Smith's victim, Cooper, who had recently been released from a hospital after sustaining broken ribs in an automobile accident, had been drinking before the altercation with Smith developed.
The story of how I received my sentence of life began in September of '68. I had just, me and my common law wife, in other words, you know, we had just left Los Angeles, ventured here in Texas for about 2 weeks, and we was to go ahead on to Louisiana and visit some more peoples, you know. In the process of me leaving Texas completely, they don't take all of my property that I brought with me in turn. So I normally keep a pistol around the house all the time in a way for protection, not only for myself, but for my wife, you know, and she knew who I was and everything, you know. So I just, you know, took it with me. After we left the house, you know, these kids was out there on the sidewalk, you know, there was only one sidewalk on this side of the streets that we was walking on by the projects. And they was throwing rocks, you know what I mean, at cars and, you know, different things that passing by, you know. So I stopped and told my wife and kid to hold up, you know what I mean. So I saw these two gentlemen standing up beside the truck. So I said, good evening, gentlemen, you know, I said, could you hold your kids down from throwing rocks into me and my wife and child get by so that they won't hit either one of them? So he said, no. I said, well, why? You know what I mean, I said, I got my wife and kid with me, I'm trying to get by, you know what I mean, so I can go home. And he just looked at me, you know what I mean, he said, no, you know. I said, well, all right, and I bowed backing off. And he said, well, hold up. He said, don't no nigga tell me nothing to do, you know. And I said, yeah, all right. And he started towards me, you know, reached in his pocket, pulled out his pocket knife, and that's when I shot him.
I went in the house, and I was in there in just a matter of minutes. I hadn't even put my purse down till one of the boys ran and hollered, a nigger shot my daddy. And of course I ran back outside, and he was down on the sidewalk, and he looked up and he just said, baby, I'm dying.
A lot of people started coming around, you know, a big crowd started gathering around. And they run over there and they started attacking me, you know. And during this attack, I assumed that this is where Miss Cooper, Leroy's wife, you know, was injured. Because I was just hitting everyone that was grabbing at me, you know. I didn't know who was who. You know, all of them was white, no blacks around. And I didn't know, I was in fear of my life anyway. And I just kept on fighting, you know, until I felt that it was time for me to leave because I didn't want to be just left there and just lynched, you know what I mean, so I run off.
He's lying. Terry Max is a liar. He killed him because he was a murderer. And he was mad at the world. He didn't kill him because he was white. He just killed him because he was mad at the world. He still got the same attitude he did in court today. He was sentenced. And I've changed my mind altogether about the man. And that makes me sad because I don't believe in punishing nobody for anything I don't think they've done. But now I think that he should stay in there forever for what he's done. He's got the same attitude he had in court.
I am the same person that killed Leroy Cooper, yes. But I am not as amped to do the same mistake or make the same mistake that I made then. But if the situation happens in the same way that it happened then, it would be unavoidable. I couldn't help but to do the same thing. That is, it's a do or die thing,
How could it be unavoidable if he was the only one that had a weapon and my husband had those broken ribs and what wasn't broken was crushed and couldn't lift a hand? How could it be unavoidable to kill anybody? It was proved that Leroy had his knife was in his pocket. And the man had been arrested and he couldn't come toward him. If he had to do it, he'd do it again. Why should the man be out to do it to somebody else in their family? Because that's what the man's going to do after I've seen him, I know.
If someone tell me that I shouldn't be paroled, I'd tell them that they're out of their mind. And the reason that I would say that, is because they'll never have, maybe a lot of them never have been even down here to really see what it's like and being down here.
He doesn't know what it's like for people that's left behind by the person he killed. He has no idea of the lies he tore up or what he did. And I just seen him, and I thank God that my kids didn't, I'll just do this, I do thank God that my kids didn't be questioning about this and see that man, because this would tear them all to pieces seeing that man again. I just thank God they don't have to go through that. And I hope to God if he gets paroled, it's not where they can see him. Because I don't think justice has been done.
They may be asking for something other than what I can give, and that's probably Cooper's life back or whatever. And that's something that I can't give. If they want me to give myself as a whole, I can't. There's nothing else I can do. I think that I've paid my due by all the years and things I've spent here. I remember a statement that was made by Carter the other night. He said, a mind is a terrible thing to will to waste. Say, man, there's millions of minds inside this TDC and other institutions that is going to waste, but should be put to use and could be put to use if people just look into the cases a little bit more closer.
At present, Calvin T. Doby and all of his 3 brothers are in prison on various charges. The sons of a hard-working father who moved them from Houston out to a farm, they grew up alongside another family of boys who in later years as Houston policemen would arrest them and carry them to court. Calvin Doby first went to prison in 1956 for robbery. He served 6 years and was released. 9 years later, he was convicted of robbing the Homestead State Bank in Houston and was given the life sentence. He has been in confinement for the past 12 years.
Well, I had a drug problem, which led me into the crime that I'm down here for. I was desperate. Drove up against the wall, so to speak. As everyone knows, it takes money to feed a drug habit. And, I suppose I had a pretty good one. That's what led me to do what I did.
The man with the sawed-off shotgun, who we later determined to be Doby, came in. He said, "Don't anyone do anything foolish, no one will get hurt." The other person leaped over the counter and started filling his bag with monies from the teller's cages. And when he had finished, well, he got back over the counter and they left together. And when they got to the door, Doby turned and said, "Well, that's all, folks." They walked on out and got in the car and sped away.
purpose for putting anyone in the penitentiary is punishment. Strictly all it is punishment that I can see. Just punishment, punishment. There's no end to it. Centuries ago, they strapped someone to the rack and they punished him. They punished him when he was unconscious. They punished him. And when do you stop? I don't think punishment in any form helps a person. You know, if you whip your children, I don't think it helps. You know, chances are great that they'll grow to hate you. I can see maybe where you lock a person up for a short period of time, you might give him a little time to think. You know, if he does that, you know, he'll be all right. But that's a lot of our problems. We don't think. You know, I stopped thinking when that needle was thinking for me. You know, prior to that, those 8, 9 years prior to that, my thinking was in pretty good shape. But when the needle gets to thinking for you, well, you have no say in what you're doing, none whatsoever.
Well, you need punishment to deter crime, I think, a certain amount of it. I'm not suggesting any severe penalties in some cases. But if you leave people like that on the street with a dope habit, well, they're going to feed it somehow.
Well, if the people that is going to be responsible for turning me loose or keeping me here, if they decide that I don't have another chance coming, I'd say take me out and shoot me and get rid of me. You know, if I don't have another chance, this is all I got to look forward to. You know, get rid of me. This is hell.
I definitely think that there's a point of no return for people in prison. After a certain length of time in there, they just give up all hopes, and they'll probably do things in the prison that they wouldn't normally do.
I don't wish to see anyone have to do this amount of time in confinement. I don't care, like I said, I don't care what crime's been committed. You know, there's other ways, there's got to be other ways, you know, to do it, to reach them, because this doesn't reach anyone.
His only hope is to get out and return to society and try to make a useful member of it. I'll agree that 12 years of total confinement must be a burden enough to have been borne by this man. I don't see any continued incarceration there would help him or society or anyone else.
I'm a pretty good sewing machine operator, you know, but they've got 26,000 other people who can do the same thing. You know, I'm not helping nobody a bit right here. Maybe, like I said earlier, if they don't think I've got deserve another chance, I might make good fertilizer. You know, that's the way they think. You know, that's where I ought to be.
George Montroy has served 16 years in prison. An illegitimate child, he grew up in orphanages and foster homes from which he was constantly running away. Finally, he was sentenced to serve time in the New York State Reformatory in Elmira. When he was released, he fraudulently enlisted in the military. Some months later, AWOL from the Army, Montroy was sentenced to life imprisonment for murdering a Waco, Texas man, Walter Gillespie, who had given him a lift on a deserted highway. At the time, Montroy was on the run from another murder he had just committed in Clarksville, Tennessee.
You have to remember now that I was in 101st Airborne. And from the day one that I went to the 101st, up until the time of the murder, they had been training me to kill. They had trained me in 1,900 different ways how to kill a man. At close combat, long range, or however. And I had always wondered, I had never killed anybody before this. And it was in my mind, what's it feel like to kill a man? How am I going to feel about it? Well, that was a dude and I was so-called friends. You know, it was one of them things. And we shared the same girls at the time. Shared a lot of things, the same clothes. A lot of times on weekends when I didn't have any place to go, I stayed at his apartment. And no, we weren't jealous of anybody or each other or our prowess with the women or who could outdrink the other or anything like that. There was none of that involved. It was a complete understanding between two people, as complete as we could get it. So one day, while me and my buddy was out hunting, the thought just overpowered me. Well, there's nobody around. Seemed like it could be the perfect crime. Now's my time to find out. So I shot him, and I killed him. It wasn't like people said it was. People felt remorse or related or high. There was nothing. It was just another act that you did. After I buried my friend, I started down toward Texas. Well, the Mexico border. I was going to go to Mexico, so they couldn't, long arm of the law couldn't reach me. And when I got to Little Rock, Arkansas, my car had broke down. And in the meantime, I had run out of money, so I started hitchhiking. A little bit outside of Waco, a dude named Walter Gillespie picked me up. And at the time, I felt like I needed some money and a transportation. And he was alone, so I went ahead and just took him out. I killed him with a wrench and took his car, left him in the ditch on the side of the road.
The jury thought he deserved life. 12 people that wasn't even involved in our family. You know, and I was at the trial. And mother, well, all three of us was, and there wasn't a person on there that we knew, none whatsoever. So they felt like he deserved life.
At the time that they felt justified in me having this life sentence, there was ample reason for them to feel that way. I had just killed their loved one. Now, 16 years later, they shouldn't feel that way. I feel they shouldn't feel that way. I wouldn't feel that way. He's dead. He's of no consequence to the family. The gap that he left has already been filled. The money-making aspect to keep that family in existence is adequately supplied. The only gap that couldn't be filled was the memory gap. You see? And that's of no financial or physical value to anybody. It's just something that they have to live with. And sooner or later, we all know that time softens any blow. And they're going to forget it.
No, there's no way we'll ever forget. Never.
But we wouldn't have to bury him. We had to go out there and identify the body after he had mutilated. If we could blow it in his, what was left of his face, his head, blow back in it to give him his life back or something else, you know. But we couldn't do that. They picked him up and put him in a bag and zipped it up. And that's the way he was buried.
They failed to look on the other side of it, though. What does a life sentence do to the person? What kind of a person does it make him after he's been down here? Let's go back and ask them now. Do they feel like I should still have this life sentence? I bet you their answers are no. I bet you their answers are that the 16 that I've done is an adequate amount of time.
He doesn't it wrong. Like I say, a man with his attitude and outlook on life and the more feelings he got about a human being, well, he ought to have to serve 2 life sentences instead of 1.
I sure wouldn't want to meet up with the boy. And I wouldn't want him not even in the same town with me. Because if he'll do it twice, he'll do it the 3rd time.
I have no intention of hurting the members of that family or their children. That these people should feel justified that a life sentence is supposed to keep me here. For what? They're paranoid. All I did was took his money. That's all I wanted, his money and his car. I didn't want to take his family's life. I had no personal grudge against Walter Gillespie. I'm from New York State. He's a Texan. I never knew the man. So they're not justified in thinking that a life sentence is going to keep me down here because they're afraid that I'm going to harm them or their loved ones.
We're not particularly scared for our particular family or nothing like that. That ain't what I mean. I'm talking about some of the old men or some lady or some kid that still got their life to live. What about them?
I have been out of trouble for, well, other than trivial or what you call misdemeanor charges, for almost 7 years now. And I have kept up my attitude and conduct and my work attitudes and my educational endeavorments and my vocational and do good work down here. I have met all the requirements that the parole board wants for me to make parole because I've passed the board each time, except for the first 3 times. Now, if the board can pass me, surely they can see that I have the requirements in which to make a good risk on parole. But the governor says no. So there's your parole looming in front of you. I'm done, as far as the governor's concerned. I'm supposed to be here for the rest of my life.
Well, the governor's got more sense than parole board.
Yes, sir. Why does a parole board, think after 15 years he paid his debt? When a judge, a jury, and a prosecuting attorney, and everybody else thought that he deserved what he got.
If I knew then, when they handed me this life sentence, what I was going to be going through, then I don't believe I would have made no deal with no DA. I believe I just went ahead and let them burn me, because you have no idea how many times I've died down here, from day to day. So why not just do it once and get it over with? I have been to the treatment center 4 times because temporarily I broke down under the pressures of this life sentence. And each time I get out of the treatment center, it's in the back of my mind, I'm coming back to this same stuff, the same stuff. And I said, God, can I take it another year? Every time I get a put off, 5 times the governor's put me off, 5 times I've had the requirements to make parole. And each year, the same thought at this time of year when I come up for parole. Can I make it another year? Can I stay alive another year?
George Montroy, eligible for parole.
Other than any of us, we don't need anything. Liquor, marijuana, or whatever. You don't need any of it. You get right down to it. And why some people choose heroin is, I guess, for the feeling. I don't know.
Calvin T. Doby, eligible for parole.
There's a meaningful thing in life for each and every individual, and life is precious, true enough.
Terry Mack Smith, eligible for parole.
Have I did anything other than the ones that I've been caught for? No, sir. Everything I did, I've been caught and I've been sent to prison. I don't have a very long arrest record,
Thurman O. Trussell, eligible for parole.
I still say I can exist today in the free world under normal circumstances and a good society, because I've got that in my heart.
Paul F. Cole, eligible for parole.
On the left, in the middle, and on the side.